Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Lisa Millette, and I am a member of the SAKI TTA team, and I will be your host today. Before we get started, I'm going to review a few housekeeping items for you. If technical support is needed, please let us know through the chat window or by emailing sakitta@rti.org. If you have any questions regarding today's material, please type them into the chat window and we will retain them for the Q&A session, which will be held at the end of the presentations. Please also keep your line muted for the duration of the presentation. We will archive this webinar within a few business days, and we will also send out an email announcement to all who have registered. This announcement will also include a PDF copy of today's presentation, and you can view all of our archived webinars on the SAKI TTA website under the webinars section. This is the National Sexual Assault Kit Initiative FY2022 Grantee Orientation, presented by the Bureau of Justice Assistance and RTI International. Next slide, please. The agenda topics for today include introductions to the BJA policy and program staff, SAKI grants program requirements, grants management best practices, and an introduction of the SAKI training and technical assistance program by RTI International. And without further ado, I will pass it over to Dr. Angela Williamson.
Hi everyone, welcome to Team SAKI. We are really excited to have you join the program. Most of you probably don't know that we have more than 80 active jurisdictions across the country now working SAKI projects. So you are in very good company. We are going to kind of explain a little bit more about how we handle the program on the BJA side. So for those of you who aren't familiar, I am the forensics unit supervisor at BJA as well as liaison to the FBI. I was recently hired to create the SAKI program, so I have been with it since day one. SAKI is my baby. Obviously, there's a lot more things that we work on these days, but SAKI is very dear to my heart. And we're going to explain a little bit more today about how all of us have different roles in helping you be successful. So on the policy side, our job is really to look at more technical things, particularly from my perspective, the forensics aspect. If you have questions about cases, methodologies, things that you can do on the forensic side. And then joining me on the policy side is my right-hand woman, Carrie Hendricks, who can really help you with the prosecutorial aspect. Carrie joined our team a couple of years ago now, and I don't know how I function without her help because there's a lot of work to be done, and she really helps with the day-to-day management of SAKI from policy. So I'm going to hand over to Carrie to talk a little bit more about her role.
Hi everybody, it's good to see you guys today. As Dr. Williamson said, my name is Carrie Hendricks and I am a policy advisor with the forensics unit. As she mentioned, I help her with the oversight of the day-to-day operations running this program. I also oversee the prosecuting cold cases with DNA program as well as the SAFE ITR program as well. Basically in my role here at BJA, I function as a policy advisor, and for you guys, that means I oversee most of the policy decisions. So if you have questions about what is allowable for your grant funding, those will roll up through Mila or Lauren to me. And if I have additional questions or need Dr. Williamson's additional DNA expertise, I will send that to her as well. And we will opine that and then send that back down through Lauren and Mila, and we'll all work together to get you an answer on things. And so sometimes you will see us both on check-ins as we work together with RTI to provide oversight to your grants. Sometimes you will just see me, but we all work together as a team to provide the oversight for the program. So it's good to see you guys. I'm sure we'll be seeing more of you in the future. Thank you. Mila, I'll hand it over to you now. Thanks.
Great. Thank you so much, Angela and Carrie, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today on the SAKI Welcome webinar. Again, my name is Mila Hago, and I'm joined by my colleague, Lauren Troy, and together we're the state policy advisors, aka your grant managers, overseeing the SAKI program. So Lauren and I are situated in the programs office at the Bureau of Justice Assistance, and while we work closely with Carrie and Angela on this program and management of the award recipient, our responsibilities do differ. in the programs office. So it's our responsibility to ensure that grantees are compliant with all the rules, regulations, and award conditions that govern the awards. And we work together with Carrie and Angela to ensure that any changes to your awards and projects fit within the overarching goals of the SAKI program. Next slide, please. So some of our responsibilities at the programs office include processing the initial applications to ensure that they're complete, working with grantees during the award acceptance process, reviewing and approving performance and financial reports, reviewing and approving any modification requests to the award, and conducting in-depth monitoring of the award. So some of these topics we will discuss today in the next few slides. And although we try to include as much information as possible, I'm sure we left some things out. So please don't hesitate to ask us questions at the end of the webinar during the Q&A session. We have included some important links throughout our presentation as well as additional resources at the end of our presentation. So I'm now going to hand it over to Lauren, who will kick us off with discussion on the award conditions.
Great, thanks, Mila. Next slide, please. So before we go in depth and discuss some of your award conditions, we want to hear from you first through this quick poll. So is there an award condition that your agency has the most questions on or have struggled to address in the past? So in the box, please enter your response, and they are as follows. A, certification of inventory, B, budget clearance, C, NEPA, or D, indirect costs. And I'll give you a few seconds to enter your selected response in that pop-up box. Okay, we'll close the poll in just a few seconds. Okay, great. It looks like the certification of inventory and your indirect costs award conditions are the most. It seems like where you guys have the most questions on. So let's discuss these award conditions further in the next slide. So a big portion of your award package are the award conditions, which are the terms and conditions of the award. By accepting the award, you agree to comply with all of them. So as such, it's really important that you review and understand all of the award conditions listed in your award agreement. And if you have any questions about them, feel free to reach out to Mila or myself. So here I'll talk more about some of the different types of the award conditions. So first, there is the standard award conditions, and that applies to all grant programs administered by OJP. There are a few standard award conditions which are important to note, such as the requirement that the designated grant award administrators and financial managers in just grants should complete the OJP financial management and grant administration training within 120 days of receiving the award. So please note that this training certification will be valid for 3 years. The next standard award condition to note is that grantees are required to comply with the requirements of 28 CFR Part 46 and all OJP policies and procedures regarding the protection of human research subjects. Another standard award condition is that all subawards require federal authorization. So your agency must receive prior approval from BJA. So if you included specific partners to whom you will be subawarding funds in your budget and we approve the budget, then those subawards are considered approved. But if you need to change your subgrantees or add additional subgrantees after receiving BJ approval, then that can be done through a change of scope GAM in just grants. Next, there are other award conditions specific to the SAKI program, such as the withholding of funds for completed inventory, which states that the recipient may not obligate, expend, or draw down more than 25% of the total eligible award amount until a completed inventory and or certification of a completed inventory has been provided to BJA. So here, you will work directly with RTI, your RTI regional team lead, on addressing this award condition. Another program-specific award condition is the withholding of funds for the National Environmental Policy Act, also known as the NEPA award condition. A representative from the Clark Group will have already reached out to you directly on the requirements of this award condition and what is needed to comply with it. Next, it's important to note that almost all new awards have some withholding award conditions placed on the awards. Those award conditions are added during the application review process when an application might be missing an attachment or OJP did not have sufficient time to fully review a project budget and requires additional time after the award has been granted to go back and address those issues. By now, all of you should have begun working with either Mila or myself to get these withholding award conditions removed. And per the language of the award conditions, grantees should not obligate, draw down, or expend any funds until all the withholding award conditions have been removed from the award. So please do not begin any programmatic or financial activity on the award until this is done, as those costs will be deemed unallowable. Finally, there are several award conditions that always raise a lot of questions, such as the submission of BJA published materials and FY2022 reporting of subawards. One thing I do want to note here is publications require prior BJA approval, and we'll discuss this approval process later in the presentation. Mila will also cover more on the FY2022 reporting requirement in just a little bit as well. Again, if you have any questions regarding your award conditions, please reach out to Mila or myself. So when you accept your award, you agree to comply with all BJA reporting requirements. As such, you are responsible for submitting several different types of reports, and they are performance reports, and these reports are completed in the Performance Management Tool PMT system and submitted into Just Grants. The second type of report is a Federal Financial Report, or FFRs, which are due quarterly and submitted into Just Grants. We'll cover a bit more on these requirements in the next few slides. However, it's important to note that if you are non-compliant with either of these reporting requirements, Just Grants will automatically freeze your funds until the reports are submitted. So please also note that delinquent reports count negatively towards your status as a grantee during risk assessment. So please do everything you can to submit these reports on time. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Here, I'll review the federal financial reporting requirements in depth. So FFRs are due in the Just Grants system after every quarter, and you will have 30 days to submit the report for that quarter. Please be advised that the person designated as a financial manager for your award must complete the FFRs in Just Grants. If this role is not yet designated by your entity for your SAKI award, please complete this action as soon as possible. And if you have any questions about the FFR, please reach out to the Office of the Chief Financial Officer, OCFO, Help Desk, whose information we included in this slide. If you do not have any programmatic or financial activity for your award in the first quarter, you may enter $0 on the FFR. And please note, federal financial report due dates are generally fixed and cannot be adjusted. So late reports submitted after the grace period into Just Grants will automatically result in a freeze of funds placed on the award, which will be removed once the FFR is submitted. And I'll turn it back over to Mila, who will talk more about the performance reporting requirement.
Great, thank you, Lauren. So as Lauren mentioned earlier, report on programmatic award activities, you will be using two different systems, the Performance Measurement Tool, or the PMT system, and the Just Grants system. The PMT reports are due on quarterly basis, 30 days after the end of each quarter. So to report in the PMT, you will need to log into that system and locate the correct report. On semi-annual basis, you will be required to submit narrative responses in the goals and objectives section, in addition to the quantitative data you report on in the PMT. The narrative responses should cover the two previous quarters, so that's January 1st through June 30th with a due date of July 30th, and July 1st through December 31st with a due date of January 30th. Once you complete the PMT report, you will need to generate a PDF file of the report and then attach it to the corresponding performance report in Just Grants, which is a separate system. So once the report is submitted in Just Grants, Lauren and I will review, and then we'll either approve the report in Just Grants, or if there's any changes that are required, we will send the report back to you in Just Grants with a note on what changes are needed. Next slide, please. So I wanted to mention that we understand that the SAKI PMT reporting requirements are extensive and require a lot of effort on the part of our grantees. But I want to assure you that your efforts are not in vain. We review and use the data which you report on a regular basis and in a number of important ways. The data helps us understand your individual progress towards your goals, as well as areas where BGA or RTI can be of assistance. It also helps us evaluate the SAKI program as a whole and allows us to provide accurate responses to data requests from all of our stakeholders, including the public and the US Congress. Finally, it helps us to make informed budget decisions, including future funding opportunities. So if you're a recipient of multiple SAKI awards under the same program area, your reporting may be especially unique. And we encourage you to please reach out to your grant managers with specific questions, and we'll help you to determine how to report your data most accurately. So next, we wanted to talk through the goals and objectives section of the report in a bit more detail. But before I jump into the discussion about goals and objectives, we wanted to pause here for another poll question, which is, do you understand the basic requirements of performance reporting under the SAKI program? And we'll give you a few seconds to respond. And while you're responding to this question, I just wanted to mention that we will use these responses to help us determine what type of trainings might be needed in the future. So we certainly appreciate you taking the time to answer the questions throughout the presentation. Oh, good. All right. So it looks like most of you feel like you have a pretty good grasp on the performance reporting requirements. That's great. Next slide, please. So as discussed in the previous slide, the quantitative data you report quarterly is invaluable for a number of reasons. However, we wanted to also stress the importance of setting clear goals and objectives from the very start of your program. Your narrative responses is what helps paint a picture of the work that you're doing and provides detail to the numbers that you're reporting. So developing clear goals and objectives from the beginning of your project will help your entity clarify the problems, issues, and opportunities in your efforts towards sexual assault reform. Goals are general guidelines that explain what you want to achieve. They're usually broad and longer term, while objectives define strategies or implementation steps to achieve the identified goals and measurable actions in the short term. So when you're thinking about the goals and objectives for your award, there are a few things to keep in mind. Each of your goals and corresponding objectives are set for the duration of your project period and should not change from one reporting period to the next. So you should be reporting on each goal each quarter or each semi-annual report. The goal should be SMART, which is specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. So even though the goals and objectives will remain the same throughout your project, the status of each goal and progress towards the goal will most likely change from one reporting period to another. The PMT provides you with pre-populated options for the status of the goals, including not yet started, in progress, delayed, completed, and goal no longer applicable. So each semi-annual reporting period, you will need to update the status and the progress towards each one of your goals. And the narrative for the progress of various sections should be detailed and specific and help clarify the quantitative data that you're reporting for that reporting quarter. Finally, the last question asks about the planned activities towards each goal for the next 6 months. Each one of your goals and progress towards them should be entered as a separate goal in the PMT report. So before I go into providing a few SAKI specific examples of what a SMART goal might look like, I wanted to share a few general tips. The PMT does not save your narrative responses in the report from one reporting period to the next. So we recommend that you keep a separate Word document with your goals and objectives so you can easily update the narrative with your progress and then copy and paste it into the PMT. And if your goals and objectives are ever edited through the change of scope, for example, the updated goals must be reflected in the PMT, meaning if a new goal is added to the project, it should also be added and reported on in the PMT. And if a goal is no longer applicable to the project, it can be marked as not applicable in the PMT. Next slide, please. So we've drafted an example of a SMART goal for each of the purpose areas 1, 3, and 4. An example for purpose area 2 would be the same as purpose area 1. So as you read through these, you will notice that they're written in slightly different ways. One, where the goal and objectives are merged into one cohesive statement. And then there's 2 examples where they're broken down into broader goals and each measurable objective. So there's really no right or wrong way to do this, so long as you're thinking of your goal using the SMART method that we described earlier. So again, as Lauren mentioned earlier, while both are important, goals and as I mentioned earlier, both are important. The goals and objectives do differ in the roles that they play in the project. So let's look at example for purpose area 1, which is to eliminate the backlog of previously unsubmitted SAKs by conducting an inventory of all SAKs within the first 6 months of the project and testing all eligible SAKs at a rate of 100 a month. So let's think about this goal in a smart way. Is the goal specific? Does it tell us what will be accomplished and what actions will be taken? Yes, its accomplishments will be the elimination of the backlog of previously unsubmitted sexual assault kits. That's the broader goal. And then the actions to be taken are to conduct an inventory and test sexual assault kits. Those are the objectives that will help us achieve the goal. Is the goal measurable? Yes. Here, the agency indicates that they will measure their success by how many SAKs they send out for testing each month until they're all tested and the backlog is eliminated. Is the goal achievable? Yes. Again, the agency indicated they have set benchmarks for themselves to help achieve the goal by testing 100 sexual assault kits at a time. Is the goal relevant to the overarching purpose of the SAKI program, which is the comprehensive sexual assault reform? Yes. It is inventorying and testing sexual assault kits, which is a foundational element of sexual assault reform. And finally, is the goal time bound? Do we set a deadline for each of the objectives? Yes, it is. As indicated in the statement, the agency plans to conduct an inventory in the first 6 months of the project and then send out a batch of 100 kits on a monthly basis. So the second goal here is an example of a SMART goal for purpose area 3, which is lawfully owed DNA work. And as you can see, the structure of the goal is very different here, where we break apart the broader goal from the more specific objectives. And some elements of the SMART structure that you will see in this example is that the goal is specific. We know exactly what needs to be accomplished and what actions will help us get there. The goal is measurable. We know that we will need to complete a census and we will need to formulate a DNA collection plan. It's achievable. We have broken it down into achievable components, and it's relevant because the more DNA profiles and CODIS, the better the chances of hitting to a particular sexual assault kit. And finally, it's time bound. We have set deadlines for the different objectives to help us stay on track. Next slide, please. And here's an example for purpose area 4. I won't go through all the SMART components here, but you can see again that the goal is broader in nature while the objectives are specific and measurable. So now that we've gone through what makes a clear and comprehensive goal, I urge all of you to go think through your own SAKI goals to see how you can apply some of the elements discussed here to make your goals more comprehensive and truly reflective of the depth of the work that you all are doing under your SAKI grant. So back over to Laura now to talk us through some budget considerations.
Great, thanks, Mila. By now, you will have seen that OCFO or BJA has requested revisions to your budget, as your budget is not yet approved. So we wanted to talk through some of the key notes to consider as you revise your budget and address our feedback. So in general, allowable costs for all non-federal entities are those costs consistent with the principles set out in the Uniform Guidance 2 CFR 200 subpart E and those permitted by the grant program's authorizing legislation. So to be allowable under federal awards, costs must be reasonable, allocable, and necessary to the project, and they must also comply with the funding statute and agency requirements. So we strongly encourage you to reference the DOJ financial guide, as well as the SAKI solicitation on a regular basis when deciding if certain expenditures are allowed under your award. Additionally, please reach out to Mila or myself with any questions you might have, and together with our policy office colleagues, we'll provide you with the most accurate assessment on whether those costs are allowable under SAKI. So let's talk about some allowable uses of funding. So we highlighted some here, but you can also reference the FY2022 SAKI solicitation to learn more about specific uses of funding under the purpose area of your award. So some examples for allowable expenditures include personnel costs, either through a newly created position or overtime for existing personnel to complete the inventory, conduct investigations or prosecutions of cold cases of sexual assault and sexually motivated homicides. This may include certain travel expenses across the region to locate victims or conduct your investigation of cases, and costs to produce or enhance necessary protocols and policies to address the gaps in sexual assault response in your community. So SAKI funds may also be used to directly cover the costs for testing of SAKs, secondary evidence, or FGG efforts. Additionally, SAKI funds may be used to pay for a victim advocate to assist victims while your jurisdiction is engaging with the victims whose SAKs are being tested. Some unallowable uses of SAKI funds include victim services such as emergency financial aid, shelter, food, transportation costs not related to their case, lab equipment, testing of current SAKs, and investigations and prosecutions of current sexual assault cases. And here I want to note that in certain circumstances, we do make exceptions here. For instance, when there's a serious threat to public safety or a current case is thought to be linked to a cold case or serial offender, these costs could be considered allowable. And if you have any questions, please reach out to, again, Mila or myself. Next slide, please. Here's a continued list of considerations when revising your budget. If you have budgeted for indirect costs, please be sure to submit and have a current and approved indirect cost rate agreement. And please keep in mind that all training requests require prior BJA approval for each specific training. Training requests submitted to BJA should be emailed to your grant manager. That includes the following information: training location dates, training topics or content, related links to the training, and any other information pertaining to the training purpose and content, total number of staff, cost calculations for all associated training costs, so transport, per diem, registration costs, etc. Some other allowable uses of funding also include costs to collect and test lawfully owed DNA from offenders or arrestees, and allocation to attend the annual BJA SAKI conference. And we wanted to recognize that although the allowable uses of SAKI funding towards victim services is limited, we understand the importance of the victim-centered approach to sexual assault reform. So as such, we wanted to highlight the funding opportunities offered by the Department of Justice, specifically through the Office for Victims of Crime, OVC, and the Office of Violence Against Women, OVW. Although some of these costs listed in these slides are considered unallowable under the SAKI program, you may want to seek out other funding opportunities to support these types of costs and work. Now, as we just covered the SAKI grant program requirements, we want to turn your attention to some of the grant management aspects of your award. Next slide, please. In this next section, we wanted to talk through some administrative aspects of grants management best practices, including the publication review process, grant award modifications, BJA grant monitoring, the differences between subawards and contracts, subrecipient policies and procedures, and procurement guidelines. Next slide, please. As mentioned earlier in the presentation, all grantees have the following award condition applied, which states that the recipient agrees to submit to BJA for review and approval any curricula, training materials, proposed publications, reports, or any other written materials that will be published, including web-based materials and website content, through funds from this grant at least 30 working days prior to the targeted dissemination date. So as stated in this award condition, you are required to have the following disclosure or statement including your publication. So I won't read out the entire statement or disclosure you need to have in your publication. However, you can see it, review it on this slide, and it's also listed in your award agreement. Next slide, please. So this slide outlines the entire publication review process. You'll see that grantees are required to submit their documents to RTI, copying your BJA grant manager for initial review at least 40 days prior to the dissemination date. So RTI will conduct their review and send it to BJA to conduct our review. BJA will then send our feedback and comments to RTI, where RTI will then provide all feedback to the grantee, and you will have 7 business days to address the feedback. Once all the feedback is addressed, RTI will notify the grantee once we provide final approval. And now I'll turn it back over to Mila, who will talk more on grant award and modifications.
Great, thank you so much, Lauren. So we understand that there will be times when certain changes or corrections may need to be made to your award throughout the project period. BJA requires that all requests are submitted through Just Grants by initiating a GAM. No changes to your award are official until they're submitted and approved through the Just Grant system. So there are 3 main types of GAMs that can be submitted in Just Grants, and they are the project period extension GAM, programmatic GAM, and financial GAM. Per 2 CFR 200, federal grant recipients are allowed a one-time project period extension up to 12 months. In certain extenuating circumstances, a second extension may be allowed. We do recommend that you reach out to your grant manager first before submitting the request in Just Grants to discuss the eligibility of an extension for your award. There are 2 types of programmatic GAMs that may be requested.
a change of scope GAM, and a programmatic cost GAM requiring programmatic costs requiring prior approval. So a financial GAM may be submitted if you need to make changes to your approved budget that require reallocation of funds between categories, moving funds into a category which did not previously have funds allocated in it, or making any changes to your indirect cost category. Additional information on when a budget modification GAM may be required can be found in the DOJ Financial Guide. And of course, you can always reach out to us, Lauren or me, if you have any questions. And a financial GAM may also be submitted to request approval of a sole source contract in excess of the simplified acquisition threshold, which is currently set at $250,000. As a best practice, we recommend that you reach out to your grant managers to clarify exactly what type of supporting documentation might be required for a particular GAM before submitting it in Just Grants, just to minimize the back and forth in the Just Grants system. Also, please note that no GAMs will be approved if you're delinquent on any reporting requirements until all delinquent reports have been submitted. And finally, we wanted to note that each GAM goes through numerous levels of approval and sometimes requires changes. So please ensure that you allow sufficient time. We recommend up to 1 month for review and approval. Once a GAM is approved, you will receive a notice through Just Grants. Next slide, please. So next, we wanted to touch upon BGA's monitoring requirements. So BGA conducts frequent monitoring of grant recipients to ensure that they're meeting programmatic, administrative, and fiscal requirements of their awards. Some types of monitoring that we conduct include desk reviews, enhanced programmatic desk reviews, also known as EPDRs, or site visits. And of course, we also review performance reports as discussed earlier. So we conduct desk reviews annually, which includes a review of your compliance to date, for example, ensuring your performance and financial reports are submitted on time. During your project period, your agency may also be selected for an enhanced programmatic desk review or a site visit, which can be conducted at any point during the grant project period if selected by the program office, so Lauren or myself, or the Office of the Chief Financial Officer or OCFO. Should your agency be selected for an EPDR or a site visit, we will work with you to conduct an in-depth review of the financial, administrative, and programmatic aspects of your award management. EPDRs and site visits also offer an opportunity for you to request an ETTA and for us to get to know your programs on a deeper level. Next slide, please. All right, so before we move on, we have another poll question for you, which is, what aspects of grant administration does your agency find the most challenging or confusing? And the choices here are subrecipient management requirements, procurement transactions, differences between subaward and procurement contracts, and reporting requirements. And we'll give you just a few more seconds to answer the question. Okay, so it looks like the differences between subaward and procurement contracts is coming in at number 1, and the rest of them are about equally confusing. Okay, well, we're going to go through some of them in the next few slides, so hopefully that'll clarify some of the confusion. So there are several common areas of noncompliance that we often note during our monitoring efforts, and we wanted to discuss with you today. The first area of noncompliance you should be aware of is that the grant award administrator and financial manager must complete the financial management and grant administration training within 120 days of the award. As Lauren mentioned earlier, this particular requirement is also a standard award condition on all OJP awards. And it's important to note that noncompliance of this requirement will result in grant funds being frozen. The second area of noncompliance is adherence to the FFATA reporting requirements. The Federal Funding Accountability and Transparency Act, or FFATA, requires that prime recipients files a FFATA subaward report by the end of the month following the month in which the prime recipient awards any subaward greater than or equal to $30,000. And this is done in the FFATA subaward reporting system, or FSRS. We included several resources on the FFATA requirements on this slide. We also often note that grant recipients misclassify subawards and procurement contracts. In fact, this area of award administration has caused so much confusion throughout the years that OJP has developed several resources to help recipients make the correct determination. This is really important because very different sets of rules govern each relationship. We provide links to those resources at the end of this webinar. Please also note that recipients of federal grants are responsible for making the determination if the pass-through funding is to be considered a subaward or a procurement contract. Next slide, please. So additionally, during in-depth monitoring, we often observe that grantees do not maintain sufficient subrecipient policies and procedures. Grantees must maintain written policies and procedures for its subrecipient award process to ensure it meets the requirements as laid out in 2 CFR 200.303 and 200.331. These policies and procedures should have specific sections that address pre-award, post-award responsibilities, and Lauren will discuss those in just a bit. And finally, in-depth monitoring often reveals that procurement contracts were awarded without adequate competition. All procurement transactions under federal awards must be conducted in a manner that provides for full and open competition, consistent with the procurement standards. So I will discuss this requirement in just a bit more detail shortly. And now back over to Lauren to talk about the difference between subawards and procurement contracts.
Thanks, Mila. As you just mentioned, a common area of noncompliance is when grantees misclassify subawards and procurement contracts. So let's review the differences between the two. OJP grantees often turn to other non-federal entities to provide goods and services in order to fulfill their responsibilities under the award. They accomplish this through the use of subawards and/or procurement contracts. And there are significant differences between the two, including how those entities are selected and monitored. OJP has developed the following guidance documents to help clarify the differences between subawards and procurement contracts and outline the compliance and reporting requirements for each. This information can be accessed in these resources listed on this slide. Next slide, please. Here we lay out some key distinctions between subawards and contractors. A subaward is for the purpose of carrying out a portion of the federal award and creates a federal assistance relationship between the recipient and the subrecipient. Subrecipients may have one or more of the following characteristics: may determine who is eligible to receive what federal assistance under the program guidelines, has its performance measured in relation to whether objectives of a federal program were met, has responsibility for programmatic decision-making, is responsible for adherence to applicable program requirements specified in the federal award, in accordance with its agreement, uses the federal funds to carry out a program for a public purpose specified in the authorizing statute, as opposed to providing goods or services for the benefit of the pass-through entity. Conversely, a contract is for the purpose of obtaining goods and services for the recipient's own use and creates a procurement relationship between the recipient and the contractor. A contractor relationship may have one or more of the following characteristics: provides the goods and services within normal business operations, provides similar goods and services to many different purchasers, normally operates in a competitive environment, provides goods or services that are ancillary to the operation of the federal program, is not subject to compliance requirements of the federal program as a result of the agreement. And to note, we provided additional guidance and resources on how to make this determination on the previous slide. Next slide, please. So here are some examples of a subaward and procurement contracts under the SAKI program. So examples of subawards include funding a rape crisis center to provide services or advocacy, funding a district attorney's office to prosecute cold cases resulting from testing of facts, funding a research partner to conduct data analysis. Examples of procurement contracts under the SAKI program include contracting with a commercial lab to test the facts, contracting with an IT vendor to build out a SAC tracking system, contracting with a staffing agency to help project staffing needs. Next slide, please. So as Mila mentioned earlier, the pass-through entity must develop and maintain written policies and procedures for its subrecipient award process to ensure it meets the requirements as laid out in 2 CFR 200. These policies and procedures should have specific sections around pre-award and post-award responsibilities and include a process for closing out subawards. Policies and procedures must be in writing and clearly describe the pass-through entity's responsibility for managing subrecipient activities throughout the award lifecycle. Mila and I have recorded a subrecipient policies and procedures webinar where we have an in-depth discussion on this requirement. and we highly recommend any grantee who have subrecipients allocated in their budgets to review this webinar. Now I'll turn it back to Mila, where she'll discuss procurement under your federal award.
Great, thank you, Lauren. So before we wrap up, we also wanted to talk about procurement requirements using federal funds. As a reminder, all procurement transactions must be conducted in a manner to provide practical, open, and free competition. Grantees should follow their local state guidelines for procurement. All non-federal entities should have written procedures for procurement transactions and should follow those procedures when procuring goods with federal funds. But it's important that local policies do not contradict federal guidelines or impose less stringent guidelines and thresholds. So when deciding on a method of procurement, an agency timeline is not a factor for compliance. There are several methods of procurement that can be considered based on the scope of the service. A contract may be procured through a shared services or other agreements between agencies, small purchases mechanism, competitive sealed bidding, competitive proposal, or procurement by non-competitive proposals or sole source. There are certain circumstances that may call for other than full and open competition. These circumstances may result in sole sourcing a contract. So to request advance approval from OJP to use non-competitive approach for a procurement contract that would exceed the simplified acquisition threshold, which again is set at $250,000, the recipient must submit a justification for use of non-competitive approach in a form of a GAM through Just Grants, as discussed earlier in this presentation. In general, grantees may make the initial determination that competition is not feasible if one or more of the following circumstances exist. And the conditions are: the item of service is available only from a singular source. The public exigency or emergency for the requirement will not permit a delay resulting from a competitive solicitation. And after solicitation of a number of sources, competition is considered inadequate. And to note here also is that any sole source contracting that does not exceed the $250,000 threshold for prior approval should still follow the OJP financial guide requirements and be properly documented. Next slide, please. So as part of your procurement process, it's important to know that documentation is crucial, and you as a grantee must ensure you maintain all procurement-related documentation for BJA's review. Regardless of the need for approval, all procurement decisions should be documented and evidence maintained for review in your award file. This also ties back to compliance and monitoring conducted by BJA. Should your agency be selected for an EPDR or a site visit, BJA will most likely request this type of documentation for review. Procurement documentation should be maintained, including what was sent out, what was received, how the decision was made. Each of the procurement contracts or subawards should have their own subfolder with all of the relevant documentation, similar to how you maintain your own grant file of your award. Also, it's important to note that when procuring consulting services, consultant rates should not exceed the $650 per day rate. Any rate that exceeds this amount must receive BJA's prior approval, which should be maintained in the procurement documentation file and would be submitted as a GAM. Next slide, please. So finally, before I hand it back over to Lauren to wrap us up, I wanted to touch upon the closeout of your award. I realize that you just received this grant and a closeout of the award is in the distant future, but it doesn't hurt to mention it. So there are two types of closeouts that are initiated in the Just Grant system. In a standard closeout, the grantee initiates a closeout of their award within 120 calendar days after the project period end date. They must also ensure that all administrative, programmatic, and financial requirements have been met, and that all expenses must be obligated by the last day of the project period. Just Grants will begin notifying the grantee 60 days prior to the project period end date. An administrative closeout is initiated in two instances: automatically on the 121st day after the project period end date, or if the grantee is unwilling or non-compliant or is unable to complete the closeout requirements. At the initiation of the administrative closeout, all grant funds will be frozen. So if you have any questions about the closeout process or timeline, please don't hesitate to reach it out to me or Lauren, and I'm going to hand it back over to Lauren to finish us off.
Great, we have one more poll for you. We'd like to know what topics you would like for BJA to cover in future training. So please enter your responses in the chat box. They include grant award modifications or changes to the award, SAKI performance reporting requirements, subawards versus procurement contracts, or training requests. And I'll give you a few seconds to enter your responses in the chat box. We'll use your responses to inform what type of trainings we can develop for you. Okay, just a few more seconds. All right, so it looks like a large percentage of you responded with SAKI performance reporting requirements. That's great to see. That's great to hear. So we do plan on investing our development into this topic. So keep tuned, stay tuned, and we'll develop content on this topic in the future. Great. Okay, next slide, please. Lastly, we understand that navigating the JEST grant system can be tricky. Therefore, OJP has developed several resources to help grantees navigate the JEST grant system. So we encourage you to take the time to review and leverage the various resources available to you in order to use the system and execute basic functions. So these resources include videos, job aids, and more on procedures for entity management, award acceptance, and grant award modifications. So please invest in the time to review these training materials, as they will help you navigate the system to manage your award. Next slide, please. So I know Mila and I just covered quite a bit of ground, so we compiled the next few slides with additional resources on each of the topics we just covered, including sub-award versus procurement contracts, subrecipient monitoring policies and procedures, and resources specific to SAKI. So we also included contact information for each of the various systems, JEST grants, ASAP, as well as the links to the SAKI, BJA, and TTA websites. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. And here they are. Next slide, please. And this is the links to the SAKI, BJA website and TTA website. Next slide, please. So here is our contact information for both the policy office and the programs office. And with that, I'll hand it over to Patty from RTI.
Well, hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. I'm Dr. Patty Mountain, and I'm the co-director of the SAKI Training and Technical Assistance Project. So just official disclaimer, you guys will see this when you start putting your materials together as well. Next slide. I'm not going to go through my bio. These slides will be available in archives, so if anyone wants to know more about me, or I would prefer we just chat instead, but feel free to read the bio. All right, so the SAKI program. For those of you who are new to the program or maybe came in the last few years, we've been around for about 8 years now. Dr. Angela Williamson mentioned that this is her baby, and I think all of us on the SAKI TTA team feel just as passionately about this project as well. We're very much dedicated to supporting you with all of your SAKI goals. You can see from this graphic here how much the program has grown, not only with the number of grantees, but also with the number of purpose areas and the distribution across the United States. It's exciting to see such a large national program having such great impact on supporting survivors of sexual assault and allowing agencies to improve their response to sexual assault. Next slide, please. So what is our role? Well, as a TTA provider, we are here for customized support to you as a SAKI grantee. We can assist with short-term goals, long-term goals, strategic planning, decisions about capacity enhancement, interagency coordination, maybe also priorities within your SAKI goals. We can facilitate cross-site communication and learning. We're very supportive of peer-to-peer connections and the value that you get from engaging with your other peers. So we're not a TTA provider that feels like we have all the answers. We have a lot of answers. We have a lot of insight. We've been involved in the project since the beginning, so we have a lot of knowledge. However, we recognize that as a TTA provider, we are also removed a bit. We are not the ones with boots on the ground experiencing these cases and working through these cases like you are. So we definitely want to value and connect you with your peers. We develop TTA curricula and materials that are going to align with policy and implementation needs. I guarantee you, if you have a question, we've probably answered it with one other site over the years, or it could be something brand new. It's a little bit more unique to what you're experiencing. We are ready, willing, and able to help with all types of questions, all types of needs. And we're going to be pretty much attached to your hip. We're a very engaged TTA provider. We're going to be checking in with you on a monthly basis. And of course, we're always available for any time in between those check-ins to reach out. We'd also, our primary goal for us as a SAKI grantee is to create and disseminate the implementation of evidence-based practices. RTI is a research institute. So then again, the training and technical assistance resources that we provide must be evidence-based, and we're very dedicated and interested in ensuring that we have long-term solutions to support you with your SAKI goals. Next slide, please. So just a little bit about us. Like I said, we've been around since the beginning. We are a multidisciplinary team. The SAKI TTA team has representation from subject matter experts, former practitioners, key stakeholders that are associated or belong to or even currently still participating in the disciplines that support sexual assault response reform. So we are a multidisciplinary team, just like you have a multidisciplinary team. That's important to us as a TTA provider. It allows us to bring in the expertise that you need when you need it in a very immediate, responsive fashion. This is just some statistics that you may want to see. Before COVID, we did a lot of in-person site visits, then COVID hit and everything switched to virtual. And now as we're coming out on the other side of that, you're going to see hybrid approaches. You're going to see where we're using the virtual platform when needed and in person when it's better that way. So it's just really a combination of things that we do now. Again, all designed to most efficiently support your needs. And next slide, please. Thank you. So as I mentioned, we are a multidisciplinary team, so I think it's fair that we mention our partners as well. We have the Joyful Heart Foundation and RAIN, as well as Project Cold Case. Those agencies represent our victim advocacy, family advocacy support. We have Dr. Rebecca Campbell from Michigan State University. She's one of our key researchers. We also have Dr. Rachel Goodman-Williams from Wichita State University. We have Equitas, which is our prosecution support. And we also have the International Association of Chiefs of Police on the investigative support side. These are our partners. So these are agencies that SAKI TTA has formed a partnership with underneath to support all of your goals. And we've been working together since the beginning, since 2015. But we also have a lot of consultants. We have additional subject matter experts who serve as consultants. Some of them were even former site coordinators or investigators at other SAKI sites. So again, it's a wealth of knowledge available for you. It's a tiered approach. We want to give you exactly what you need in a timely fashion. Next slide, please. All right, so how are we going to help you? Couple logistical things to go over. Don't worry if this seems like a lot of information and you didn't quite get it all. It's okay. We're going to be reaching out to you. SAKI TTA is going to be reaching out to you, welcome you into the program, into your new award, and kick off starting how we can help you. I know Mila and Lauren mentioned earlier that you're going to be working closely with us to get that inventory certification process completed. That'll be one of the first things we start off with, is helping you get through that inventory of sexual assault kits. You will have a regional team lead who will serve as your primary point of contact from SAKI TTA. We'll be introducing you to this regional team lead over the next few weeks as you guys get up and running. We're going to work with you to strategic plans that help organize and identify your needs and help address what might be immediate, like the inventory, for example, or what might be mid, what might be long-term goals or gaps. So we're going to work with you. It's a very collaborative process when we create the strategic plan. It's SAKI TTA and you working together to achieve your goals. We're flexible in the type of TTA that we provide to you. So you can reach out to us, email, through the help desk, multiple ways to get a hold of us. We always want to be timely and responsive in the type of TTA that we provide. And that may mean providing you with different types of formats. So it might be easiest, quickest, most effective to hop on a call. It might be a little bit better for something that's a little bit longer term. Maybe we want to do a virtual training with you. Maybe you're going to look at more like a regional event where we can get people together to come in in person. Either way, we'll work with you on what looks best to resolve the issue with you. Regional team members, just real quick, that's that whole side of partners and consultants I mentioned earlier. We have a whole team behind us. SAKI TTA has a large group of folks ready to assist you as you're needed. Okay, next slide. All right, couple of key resources here. If you're not familiar with the SAKI TTA website, sakittta.org, go ahead and hop on there, start exploring, looking around. It's going to be a one-stop shop for a lot of the things that you have coming up in your program, and a lot of the needs will be addressed through those resources. Like I've said, we've been around for a while now. We've built a lot of resources, but we're still very much able to do consultation as far as in-person and virtual as well. So don't feel like everything is in a clearinghouse. It's not. But these are some great things to get started if you haven't had a chance to look at, like the SAKI Toolkit or the SAKI Virtual Academy. You'll start seeing email invites to our SAKI virtual working groups. We have multiple working groups going on each month where SAKI grantees get together underneath the umbrella of that topic and discuss through their challenges, successes, learn from each other, and also receive guidance from subject matter experts. Next slide, please. All right, so like I said, what's next? What can you expect next? You're gonna get a email holler from your regional team lead, and probably myself as well, welcome you into the program. We'll be sending you a welcome packet. It's an informative packet that gets you started in your SAKI goals. Those SMART goals that Mila talked about earlier, we'll be helping you with that as well. It'll have some overview information. I do suggest when you get the welcome packet, I realize it's a lot of information coming at you at once, but please take a little bit of time and go through that welcome packet. We will keep referring to it and bringing it back into our conversations, at least for these first 6 months as you get used to being in the program. And of course, we're all very excited. We have our 7th annual National SAKI Grantees meeting coming up. Summer 2023, and fingers crossed right now, we are still tracking to be in person. It's been a while since we've been in person, so I know we're all looking forward to that. And it's a great time for you to interact with your peers as well. And next slide. Okay, contact information for SAKI TTA, myself, the help desk. You can reach us through any one of these avenues, so feel free to snag one. Any questions that come up, don't hesitate, don't be shy, and we'll be talking soon when we reach out. Thank you very much for your attention. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Patty. So at this point, we don't have any questions coming in, but we can give folks a minute or two to type any questions that they have into the chat. And while folks are thinking of potential questions, we are going to launch one final poll. These are questions that help us understand your opinion of the webinar today, and it's valuable information that we do report back to BJA. So if everybody could take a minute to participate in those poll questions, we'd appreciate it. And while we're waiting for potential questions to come in, I'd like to turn the floor back over to our presenters to close this out with any final thoughts.
Well, again, from SAKI TTA, it's just really great to see everybody here. It's great to see how this program is expanding and growing. And I'll pass it over to BJ.
Thanks, Patty. I think we just want to tell you all, if you're brand new to the program, do not be shy. Reach out anytime, ask any questions. And I always say this to the brand new grantees, trust me, someone else has already come across the same problem that you have. So don't worry about asking. And that's pretty much it. Welcome to Team SAKI. We're really excited to have you here.
Thank you. Just again, a reminder that we will archive this webinar and post it to the SAKI TTA website within a few business days. And we will also send out an email announcement to all of registered with a link to the recording and the slides. So at this point, it doesn't look like we have any questions. And if nobody else has anything to add, we can go ahead and close out the call for today.